And here we go, friends. We have got an episode of the RR Show coming from malicious compliance and petty revenge. Going to be fun, going to be great. So let's get into this episode of the RR Show with me, Vince, right now. Our first story is coming from r/malicious compliance, posted by user ConsistentShoe9602. Boss yells at me for following instructions and tells me to do the opposite next time, which backfires. About 20 years ago, I used to work as an office assistant at a small company where we would receive orders from clients and then we would assign the work to one of our freelancers who were well compensated and respectable professionals. My boss was such a professional herself, and when possible, we would assign that work to her. I accepted the minimum wage job because she told me I could sometimes get tasks assigned as a freelancer with the nice freelancer compensation. That she would personally train me, and in less than a year, I would most likely be promoted to a regular freelancer and make very good money. This sounded like a great career path to my young and naive ears. One of the things she had told me in the very beginning was that when you take over an order, you become like a project manager for that order. You need to make sure that the freelancer would finish the work on time, as the work was usually time sensitive. Additionally, she loved going on long lectures about how she is paying me, minimum wage, for me to use my brain and figure out things when necessary. These lectures were mainly a vehicle for her to stroke her own ego by explaining to her employees how our brains were not as smart as hers. One day, our biggest corporate client had placed a large order that was due on a Monday by noon, and we had assigned the task to my boss to do over the weekend. It was Monday morning. Time was ticking and my boss hadn't arrived at the office. The client called to see if we were going to provide the work soon, as it was urgent. I tried calling my boss, who didn't pick up her mobile. I called half an hour later and texted her. No answer or reply while noon was fast approaching. So I called her landline at home. Her husband picked up, told me she wasn't at home, and I explained very briefly why I was trying to get a hold of her. Less than an hour before noon, my boss called, furious that I had been so insistent on getting a hold of her and that I had created a state of stress and emergency at her house. Her home number was for emergencies only, and this wasn't an emergency. It's not professional to call people when they are not at work, she told me. She told me she got everything under control and she was now sending the work directly to the client. When she arrived at the office, she gave me a big scolding in person and told me that I do need to hound other freelancers, but not her. It was her business and she got everything handled. She knew all the clients and they were clients because of her. She looked at me in the eye and told me, if I take over a task, it's not your task anymore. It's my task. You don't need to bother me with reminders. You just give me the instructions from the client and I'll handle everything myself. From that point on, your job is done. I never miss deadlines. If the client calls, you tell them I'm on it and you don't call me or text me about it. Fair enough. I apologized for the stress and repeated the new instructions back to her for confirmation. She was very happy with that and I confirmed I understood everything. She, once more, gave me her favorite lecture about how she's paying me, minimum wage, for me to use my brain with a lot of condescending examples of how she always uses her brain, unlike us normal workers. I could only nod along as if her narcissistic rant was actually teaching anybody anything. About a month later or so, another client comes in with an order. I accepted it. My boss was able to handle it. So I forwarded everything to her, and I considered my work in regard to that order done as instructed. On the day of the deadline, I was on vacation and was hiking in a remote area with pretty spotty cell coverage. The other office assistant called me and told me the client had called the office to check if the work was ready. I told my colleague that our boss was on it and that we didn't need to worry as our boss was going to handle it, and that my clear instructions were to tell the client our boss was personally on it. The task would be done by the deadline and explicitly not to call our boss to remind her of the deadline. Then, since I was on vacation, I needed to conserve my battery, and everything at the office was handled, I switched off my phone. An approaching deadline that my boss had to meet was explicitly not an emergency. Also, I had recently realized that my boss had knowingly misled me about the carrier opportunities this job was affording me, so I wasn't going to be on call on my rare day off. While I was hiking without a care in the world, my boss had managed to forget about the deadline. By the time she realized she had missed it, the office was closed. My boss had urgently finished the work, but it turned out she didn't know the clients so well as she didn't have their contact details. As the order was in the office and my phone was off, she had to go there herself, fetch it, and use the contact details to deliver the work late. This was particularly embarrassing as my colleague had informed the client our boss was personally doing the work for them. When I came back to work, it was pandemonium. She screamed at me, but I simply pointed out that everything I had done was following her instructions. Why did you do this? You told me to. Why did you do that? You told me to. She was fuming. But she knew I was correct, and I had acted exactly as instructed. She also screamed at me for my phone being off, but I said I needed to conserve my battery for emergencies, and this was clearly not an emergency. And I'm not on call while I'm on vacation anyway. Malicious compliance for the win, right? Well, narcissists never accept the blame, and she had no idea of how to shift the blame to me after all. But you didn't provide me with the client's contact details with the order assignment. How could I have delivered them the work? It was your fault for not providing me with all of the information. I pointed out that she told me she knew all of the clients personally, but if she had used her brain like she's constantly telling us to do, she could have easily noticed that the order instructions were on the client's letterhead with all their contact details spelled out on every single page, bottom and top. Now that was a huge slap for her fragile ego, and remembering her face in that moment still makes me smile. Needless to say, I was fired. Of course, I didn't mind. Don't you just love happy endings? Our second story is posted on r/Petty Revenge, posted by user Dr. Deadpool, but the E in Deadpool is a 3. Work forces me to train my own replacements, so I do, with the same effort they put into hiring him. My first job out of high school was doing the landscaping for a posh hotel near my hometown. I loved the job, and the work was often demanding but rewarding nonetheless. After working there a few years, the hotel was sold to a businessman as the owner wanted to retire in Florida. The new owner had a gambling addiction and a drinking problem. He constantly drained funds from his business to support his vices, which showed up in how quickly the hotel went from posh to literal definition of a roach motel. I continued doing my job faithfully despite the rapid downturn in overall appearance. My paychecks were still nice, and it didn't feel as many effects of the downturn as other departments. About 6 months into the new ownership, the owner introduces me to his nephew and says that he wants me to train him to do my job so that I don't have to spend all day long doing the landscaping on the property. The nephew seemed more concerned with playing Pokemon on his Game Boy than working, and even when I set him to do simple tasks like raking leaves or watering flowers, I would often find him playing his Game Boy somewhere or sitting in the lounge drinking with his uncle. I constantly complained about him to the owner and told him that I had enough seniority in my position to search for and train a more suitable person to do the job. That's when the owner dropped the bombshell. His nephew was going to replace me in 6 months. He was only paying his nephew minimum wage, whereas I was nearly getting 3 times as much because of my seniority and how much the original owner loved me. At this point, I realized that I was too expensive for him and that he wanted to have more money available for his habits. I immediately started looking for a new job. I continued working at the hotel, but didn't put as much effort into it. I showed the lazy nephew some basic stuff, but I pretty much left him to his own devices for the rest of the day. By the time I was asked to leave, the amount of neglect was overwhelmingly apparent. Poison ivy growing around entrances. The normally well-manicured lawns looked like overgrown meadows. 6 months after I left, there was a massive fire in the middle garden because the nephew somehow thought the most effective way to get rid of poison ivy and weeds in the mulch was to douse it in gasoline and light it aflame. He was stood nearby with a garden hose to put it out, but was swiftly overwhelmed as dry leaves and other material quickly spread the flames into the hotel itself. The fire department was called and the hotel was evacuated. The nephew was arrested for arson despite trying to convince everyone that he fully intended to put the fire out with the garden hose after he got the desired effect. The owner was forced to sell the hotel and the restaurant on the property to a franchise. He eventually was audited by the IRS and arrested for tax fraud. Today, the property is bustling again. The restaurant was bought by a Mexican restaurant franchise and does decent business. The 2 side blocks of rooms that were damaged in the fire were torn down and turned into an outdoor banquet area for the Mexican restaurant. The main hotel bounced back after the owner was replaced. The entire property barely resembles what it looked like when I worked there. Our final story of this episode is coming from r/petty revenge, posted by Black Angel 715. Refuse service when you legally can't? Hope you enjoy the fine. I live in Portugal. Here, when something happens at a commercial space, you write in the complaints book. My parents own a business, which mean I am fairly well informed about how these things work. I had recently had an encounter at this kiosk with this man, and he lingered at my card checking numbers, names, flipping it over, looking at the CVV. It was uncomfortable. On to the exchange. Me. Good morning, I would like 2 packs of Winston 100s 26 cigarettes. He proceeds to ask me for my card with a hand gesture. Him. It's $12.20. Hand gesture again. Me. I would prefer to insert the card myself. You can't do that. I won't touch the machine at all, only insert the card. Throws the machine down in disbelief. I can't let you do that. Me. Are you refusing service? Him. Yes. I asked for the complaints book. He refused, which he legally can't. But it was just me and him. I wait until another client shows up and ask for it again. He relents and gives it to me. As I open it, I realize I didn't have a pen. You have to write out your complaint. I ask for one. He refuses. I say, okay. As soon as I open the book, I see something wrong. The first complaint is completely ripped out. All 3 pages are. The first page is for the person who makes the complaint. The second one is a copy for the business, and the third is to remain in the book. Under no circumstance is the third page to disappear, even if it's a mistake and or taken back by the person who makes the complaint. It must remain in the book. Seeing as I had no pen, I start the process online. Take the info and start snapping pictures of the missing pages. As soon as he saw me taking pictures, he does a beeline from around the counter and tries to take the book away. I said I have every right to keep this book until I'm done with my complaint. He gets huffy and more clients show up. He goes back behind the counter. The thing about these complaints book is that you write in it with ink, but then you have to follow through and submit them online to the proper authority, depending on the complaint. But I didn't have a pen. So I bypassed the ink format and immediately submitted online mentioning the weird analysis of my card, the refusal of service, and as the last middle finger, I also mentioned the missing pages with the pictures of the missing pages itself and the business's stamp in the same picture so they can't refute and say it's some other book. Now, because it was online, it goes straight to the authority case and you can choose which department depending on the complaint. After about an hour of nicotine withdrawal of looking the business up, the pictures and the writing the complaint itself, I hand the book in with no written complaint. He opens it, chuckles to himself, and smugly says, "Did you give up because you didn't have a pen?" I say no because I didn't have a pen. I decided to submit it directly online, and as my last mic drop moment, I said I didn't feel comfortable writing it in the book as the first complaint had magically disappeared from the book. The color drained from his face because we both knew what would happen. Even if they didn't take the complaint seriously, tampering with the book is absolutely taken seriously, and that absolutely will be followed up and fined accordingly. Then I smiled and said I wish I had a pen and left. So thanks for being with us. The RR Show is a production of Evergreen Podcasts and Wessler Media. Now, if you'd be so kind, please follow or subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra nice, you might as well leave a 5-star review. But for more, visit the website, rrshow.com. That is rrshow.com. I'm your host, Vince, and we'll see you next time here on The RR Show.